Hey Jack,
Hey Jimmy.
why did Luke fall into the watering hole when he went out with his training helmet on?
No idea, buddy.
He couldn't see that well.
Oh gosh.
You don't
Sorry,
even get a
folks.
fake laugh for that one.
No,
Sorry.
that's shocking. That is shocking. Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 91, where we're going to be discussing what we look for in a Star Wars movie.
Wanna buy some death sticks?
That's not a moon. It's a space station.
Always a pleasure to meet you.
And my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy!
You failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 91. As always, thank you for joining me, Jack, Jimmy, and Charlie here at Explore the Force. And if you're not already, make sure to hit that follow button on your podcast provider of choice and leave us with a rating. And before we start, we'd like to wish Brendan Wayne a massive, happy, huge birthday this past weekend. A friend of the show and a legend of the Star Wars community. And speaking of legends, Jimmy, how's your week been, bud?
Uh, Busy. We're winding up to parent-teacher conferences and league, and then state, and then swim to a wish. It's going to be like nonstop. And then as soon as that's over, I get to start girls swim season. So this is the busy season. There's been between seasons, like the end of boys, beginning of girls, chaos. Not to mention trying to do a full-time job in the middle of there. So yeah, real busy. Been all right, and some cold weather coming in. So we'll see what happens. What about you, Charlie? Are you staying nice and warm?
No, I'm not. I'm constantly freezing cold, and that's great. No, it's been an all right week, battling the weather, battling the gloomy days, but going to my parents for a few days next week, so that'll be nice. Just take some time out and actually just have a bit of a break,
There you go.
honestly. Jack, how are you doing?
Yeah, busy as always. However, I'm not going to be on next week's show, unfortunately, because I'm getting ready to fly to Jakku, quite literally, to a nice sunny climate in the desert. So, yeah, I will be super, super busy. And yeah, like you said, Jimmy, I know we've been super busy. I know Charlie's been super busy, but I know we've got some awesome Force encounters.
For my ally is the Force.
Okay, so this week's Force Encounters, me and Charlie sort of combined our Force Encounters because we had the excellent honour of hosting on our YouTube live Rebel Scum Con. And it was an amazing chat with the guys there that are organising it. I cannot wait with some of the things they've been telling us. It's bigger, it's better, more guests. They even let us
Mhm.
announce one of their guests that completely took us by surprise. Again, if you want to see that, head over to YouTube. Make sure you're checking it out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. More updates will be coming for Rebel Scum Con. I know Jimmy was there. Amazing, amazing show. Cannot wait for this year. I think that's it for my Force encounter. What about you, Charlie? Anything else to add on that?
No, I had such an unbelievably fun time with Rebel Scum. Me and Bobby connected deeply over Jar Jar Binks. You can go and watch that footage on our Instagram. It was a 10 out of 10 experience.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
Jimmy,
brilliant.
what about you this week?
Oh yeah. I had fun watching you guys when I could. A parent would walk in, I'd hit mute, and I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, get out, get out, get out," and then I would turn it back on and comment. And yeah, I love those guys, super nice fellas. And um, sorry I missed that, but yeah, this week I finally finished the Battle for Jakku, or the Battle of Jakku comic book run. It finally ended. Finally, it was only 12 comics, but I'll be doing a review for that. I think it's kind of important to the
Yep.
story. It kind of fills a little bit of a gap. You'll see it's kind of all over the place, but it was a fun comic. If you're into comics, I do suggest that you read it for Star Wars because it kind of branches out a little bit, and it kind of drops some people, and it brings a lot of people in, like a lot of people I was surprised by, and it gives us some backstory on some people. So it had some fun. Like the story itself wasn't like anything like earth shattering,
Yeah.
but it just brought a lot of people in. It introduced some stuff, and I thought it was pretty cool. And it's only 12 comics, 12 run. So kind of a fun comic though. I enjoyed it, and like I said, we'll be dropping reviews on it here pretty soon.
Nice.
But yeah, so that was fun. And and a couple other comics came out, Legacy of Vader and the New Legacy, which is kind of combining a bunch of characters. So comics are really jumping off. But we have more news, so let's go head over to Batu and see what's coming out of there.
The people in this crowd will soon be among almost 40,000.
For those who are among the 900 with news media or promotional tickets, this sneak preview probably will be the only chance to see the Empire Strikes.
Okay, so this week's news then, Star Wars Skeleton Crew star and twin brother Jude Law has confirmed that his mysterious Jedi, Jod Nanarwood, had never used a lightsaber before the show. And at MegaCon 2025, he was a surprise guest at the panel. Not quite sure I was a surprise guest because people knew he was there. Anyway, he confirmed he decided not to do any training with the lightsaber rather than the extensive kind of fight scenes that have been done with other actors. He knew how to handle the swords. He'd done stunts and stuff like that before with swords. So essentially just sort of made it up as he went along. However, he goes on to say, we kind of like the idea that he had zero lightsaber experience. And I think this actually worked quite well and ties in nicely with the backstory that we've got of Jod. It maybe sort of adds a bit more story to why that certain scene with his master was axed as well. Didn't really need it. And it was evident as well with the lightsaber skills, let's say, that did in the series. It wasn't really anything spectacular. Yes, he was with kids and, he beheaded a robot. But yeah, I think it went quite well. I think the idea of a zero lightsaber experience was good for the show. What do you reckon, Jimmy?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, it wasn't enough that he did. I mean, he's got the Force. I feel like the Force is just a lightsaber is just an extension of someone that has the a little bit of training at least. But yeah, I liked it. I mean, I think it works out well, and it's cool that he was honest about it.
Yeah,
Charlie.
I found it really interesting actually because there was a lot of fan speculation about Jod's particular lightsaber form.
Yeah.
I believe lots of Vapad Geo Form 7 was mentioned, which is Mace Windu's one. And I find it so funny that these fans were poring over these seconds of lightsaber usage, and actually he had no formal training whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think it was an interesting choice, but it plays so well into Jod's character. And also, like Jack said, that's a really good point. It makes perfect sense why they maybe cut the scene with his Jedi Master, because it wouldn't have been ultimately necessary. So, yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised by that piece of information. It was good.
Yeah, I think it kind of showed too, like he just kind of gets by. Like he figures it out as he goes. So I think that's
Opportunist.
kind of fun. Yeah. Spoiler alert for this next bit. It's about Mando and Grogu. So if you don't want to, I'm kind of shocked by this, but I'm excited by the news. So here's your warning. It's going to be about a minute and a half of me talking. So here we go. Juicy news here and some spoilers. Beware. Sigourney Weaver credits Grogu, otherwise known as Baby Yoda, for the reason why she signed on for the latest Star Wars blockbuster, The Mandalorian and Grogu. She says, I get to have scenes with little Grogu, which is probably why I did the movie, Weaver said in an interview with Games Radar. And he's a little badass too. It's going to be wonderful for people to see what Grogu is up to now because he's grown up a little bit and is capable of much more than maybe we think just watching the series. Although details on her role unveiled back in May are slim, Weaver went on to tease, I play a wonderful character who is, in a position of authority, and I have to send the Mandalorian out on a mission on the Outer Rim where all the bad stuff happens. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen some... as soon as the child at the time, people started putting the Mando armor and things like that, and then I think this is cool. How big of a time jump are we talking? Like, there's a lot that kind of I feel like that's a whole episode on itself, like that discussion right here. So I'll just say, what do you guys think?
Yeah, there's a lot to take away just from those couple of paragraphs. I think the big thing for me is I think this is going to be ahead of this TV series anyway, because it said about Grogu growing up a little bit. And straight away, my Star Wars theory brain is going 10 to the dozen. And I've got images of Grogu being very similar to how Yoda was in Attack of the Clones. So we will see, and we sort of know Weaver's character in this. But I'm more interested as to why the Mandalorian would even listen to somebody and go to the Outer Rim, because what has he got to achieve now? That's my take on it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. What about you, Charlie?
I think it's one of those times where a new member of the Star Wars cast has done that wonderful thing where they say just enough to not get in trouble, but
Yeah.
just so much that all of us as Star Wars fans go absolutely crazy. I feel like she said so much in this, and like Jack, my little brain is going 100 miles an hour. I love that she's obviously got such a connection to Grogu, and I think she said in another part of the interview that it's never a franchise she thought she wanted to be a part of, but obviously being invited in this way makes it something different, and it becomes quite special and quite unique. And I'm delighted. I'm a huge Sigourney Weaver fan. I have been for a
Yeah.
long, long time. So this is just fantastic in my opinion. And more Grogu, the better. And especially if he's got tiny little Mando armor on. Guys, does it go over his ears or do his ears stick out of the little helmet?
So many questions.
So many. Then what does he sound like? Right? We got Preston. We've only
Yes.
seen
Is
two of
he
his
going to
species:
speak?
Yoda and Yaddle. Yaddle speaks
Yaddle.
normally. Bryce Dallas Howard voicing her. And then what? So what's going to happen there? Because that's huge. I mean, it's almost as big as his name, right? Grogu.
Mm.
Yeah.
If he doesn't come across and the fans don't like the way he sounds, the way he speaks, can you imagine? You're going to take the one thing that Star Wars fans can agree on, and we're
Yeah.
going to split it. I mean, that's some pressure for Filoni and for Favreau and for everyone at Star Wars,
Mhm.
because like Grogu's the one thing that kind of pulls everybody together. Everyone can agree that Grogu is awesome. Let's hope and pray and trust in Dave and John that they nail that.
But it has been done with Groot, and I thought they did it quite well with Groot in Marvel quite well.
Yeah.
'Cause, he grows up, doesn't he? And that voice doesn't go a bit crazy. You imagine
Yeah.
Grogu with like a Pedro Pascal's like accent.
a little Spanish accent,
Yes.
kind of, or whatever, like Southern, South American
Yeah,
accent would be all right.
crazy.
Did you guys see the video that was posted by Disney Parks? Because I did, and I've watched it about 100 times now. We are getting Luke Skywalker at Galaxy's Edge. They did this super cool little reveal video where the camera comes in and it's the back of Luke Skywalker in his black cloak, and he's got R2D2 with him. I'm super excited. I think last year they added Anakin and Padme, which was super beautiful. Really loved seeing the videos of those interactions. But yes, Luke Skywalker, let's go. Can somebody please get me tickets to Galaxy's Edge? Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm curious as to what this kid looks like.
Yeah.
So,
It looked good from the back.
yeah.
Yeah.
It looked good from the back. I will say that. In other news as well, Koo Stark is taking on the mouse. It's suing Star Wars producers for a meager £190 million. The 68-year-old actress starred as Cammy Marstrap in the 1977 film A New Hope, but her scenes were cut from the final film. The scenes in question have resurfaced online in recent times, and the character has appeared in various spin offs over the years. So, litigation filed in an LA court claims that the production company has profited off her likeness. The legal action was brought by actor Anthony Forrest, who also starred in the film as Fixer in scenes that were eventually cut, and it is claimed that their intellectual property rights were exploited when the scenes became available online and on DVD. Now, pretty sure these characters came back to life in the Book of Boba Fett, didn't they?
Her character did. I don't think Anthony's did, because remember when we had a chat with Mr. Forrest and he wouldn't tell us what the picture
Yes.
was, and I asked him multiple times, and he
Yeah.
never would explain what that character was, because he's the guy who says move along, right? Or
Yeah.
he's the one that gets Jedi mind tricked by
One of the
Kenobi.
original Stormtroopers.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I think this is just a money grab. I mean, I think that because they brought her back in to be in the Book of Boba Fett at Tashi Station, right? When
Yeah.
he comes walking in and he lays waste. It's the characters that were both cut from that scene, or that scene that was cut had Luke's friends in it. I thought I was, all the hype that it was those two characters brought back. So I mean, she got paid for that, right?
Must have, surely. Interesting point, though. I'm going to go back and listen to our previous episode with Anthony Forrest and have a little schnoodle around there. Maybe the Mouse House is listening to Explore the Force as well. Who knows?
Oh.
Who knows? And in other news, we have a interesting article, to say the least. Now, I know this is big on Jimmy's list today. So, Jimmy, Tell me about this article that you've read.
Well, do I want to thank you, Charlie, for sending this to us? Charlie was doing her research as she does so well every time, and it was, what is it, Forbes magazine, written by senior contributor Eric Kane, and it says the Acolyte ruined Star Wars skeleton crew before it ever had a chance. And I'm not really sure why this article was in Forbes. This seems like something that very popular YouTubers would say, right?
Yeah.
Maybe YouTubers that have over 3 million followers and things like that. I never want to say someone's not a true Star Wars fan, because Star Wars is for everybody. But this guy doesn't sound like he likes anything. And I was just, I'm going to let Charlie go, because I always want people to like what they like, and I don't have a problem with that. But I have a problem with this article. I feel like this is just anger, hate, clickbait, and they're trying to jump on that train where everyone, if you're mad at Star Wars, you'll get clicks. And it, for a lack of a better word, it pisses me off as I read it. So, Charlie, what do you think?
That is absolutely valid. So, yeah, I was doing a little bit of research for today's topic, and I stumbled across this article, and the headline grabbed me in because I absolutely can see a discussion where that point is valid. I do absolutely think that the aggressive and unhappy response to The Acolyte absolutely had a dampener on how Skeleton Crew was viewed, watched, and enjoyed by either the wider fan base or the more specific fan base that it was more tailored towards. Absolutely a valid point to discuss. However, what frustrated me is a lot of this piece came across as heavily, heavily opinionated, very much weighed against Star Wars, against its most recent products and productions, with very, very little kind of actual space to discuss, well, maybe this could be a good thing, maybe this could incite different change. Instead, it ends up very opinionated, quite aggressive, and like Jimmy said, quite mean.
I just
He
don't
he
understand.
talks Yeah, he talks about how let me try and find the quote, my apologies. He talks specifically about how he thinks Star Wars could be improved, which is absolutely fair. This is literally what we will be discussing today. Absolutely a fine thing to chat about between fans. He says a good place to start would be coming up with a better understanding of who the core Star Wars fan base is and what kind of content they actually want. I agree with that. I think that's I think that's absolutely fair. Market research is essential. Brilliant. However, the longer this quote goes on, the more devolved it seems to go, and it frustrates me as a fan. As I've noted many times in the past, the answer to that question is pretty straightforward. The vast bulk of the Star Wars fandom is made up of men and women who enjoy entertainment that appeals to men and want to see heroic space fantasy that puts an emphasis on great characters, fun adventures with clearly defined heroes and villains. I know he is talking in marketing terms, in terms of strict demographic between what men are interested in and what women are interested in, but that comes across not very well, my dude.
This is
Doesn't make you look great.
the same statement that got Rebel Force Radio into all that trouble probably
Yes.
5 or 6 years ago, when they said the majority of Star Wars fans are men and they should make it for men, basically. And I don't know the exact quote, but I know they had, and then ended up having to take a break. And they were one of the longest running Star Wars podcasts out there, and well
Yeah.
respected. And they've kind of come back and they're doing their thing. But if I'm a woman and I read this article, I would be, so I have to like what men like. You know what I mean? Like, it's not what I'm surprised, because this came out in January 29th, or 29th of January. I am surprised that there hasn't been more uproar about just that comment in itself.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by it, and it just,
Mm.
and I think you're right, Charlie. It is like, he's talking the nuts and bolts of like marketing research, but the core of Star Wars in 1977 probably was men, right? It probably
Mhm.
was. Like, we're in a different
Yeah.
time period. We're in 2025 now. Star
Yeah.
Wars is for everybody. It's
Yes.
okay. Like, when I was going to high school, you couldn't be a nerd. Like, I couldn't be this guy right now without being ridiculed when I was in high school or in the elementary school and middle school and things like that. Now it's all right. So, I mean, more people are coming out. And I think maybe that's the difference. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily, okay, I'm going to stop, because it's just I'm going to start to go down a rabbit hole of
And
anger. So
breathe.
this is
Yeah.
the path of the dark side for Jimmy, because when people start saying things like this, I don't think it's any one person's job to pigeonhole who Star Wars fans are.
100%.
Exactly.
100%. And it leads us nicely into this week's main topic. So this week we asked you, the listeners, what do you look for in a Star Wars movie? And as always, we had some class comments come our way. So here are your thoughts.
All right. Yes. Up first, we have Trevin Jones. He said story, plot, and how that story relates canonically to the stories already written or shown. If it's an original story, then it's the acting and the portrayal of the characters, if they're believable. I can agree with that.
Nice.
I also could absolutely agree with that. Next up, we have Mark Rolfe, who said a connection back to the first thing that made me fall in love with it.
I like that one.
That's important. Yeah.
Nice. Next, we said airtight plot, great character development, space battles, and lightsaber duels. And that was from our good friend over on Explore the Force. Lost his name. Wait for me 2 seconds. Who was that? Chris Vandermeil from the Belgium
Yay!
Prop Builders crew. I did know who it was, Chris. Don't worry about that. And we also had a last minute one as well. Wayne Cooper Smith said a good story, good versus evil, Empire versus Rebels, lots of battles, weird creatures, and maybe the odd lightsaber. Managed to redeem myself.
Nice.
Brandon, I apologize for this, but Clan Brandalorian, a big Detroit Lions fan, said a
Go
good
Lions.
story with cool visuals, simple as that. I do agree with
spot on.
what he says. I love the fact that it's clear cut for Brandon. He is not a Lions fan, folks.
No. We had Paul and Wonder who just said more movies. Yes, my guy, I 100% agree. Just more movies.
More movies.
Yes, 100% as well. And lastly, we've got Jez Allison. He said goosebumps, hairs on my arm sticking up. I've had that from all the trilogies. The feels, the fun, the imagination, and maybe a dollop of Ben Burt / Matt Woods effects. He's also a huge sucker for John Williams and John Williams inspired music. And if you put Babu Frick in it, he'll probably love it. And we've got lots
Yes.
more comments, which we will be reading out shortly. However, let's dive into our thoughts.
Hey, do you guys like movies?
They're all right.
Do you guys like Star Wars movies?
Oh, yeah.
Do we like the same Star Wars movies? Because I'm pretty
Oh.
sure, yeah. That's where, and that's kind of where I think this topic we've been talking about this. That since Charlie's come in, she likes things, Jack likes things, I like things, and we don't all match up. And so we kind of like, well, what makes, that's why I got fired up about that article. Like, he's sitting there saying like it's what he says is what makes Star Wars, and I feel like it's different for every single person. That's
Yes.
kind of what we're here to talk about
Yeah.
today, right? So, again, we know you guys all love Star Wars movies. You wouldn't be listening or watching our show if you did not, except for hi mom. But everybody else, obviously huge Star Wars fans. So let's dive into that. Let's just talk about what makes a movie. What makes your movie? Because we are from different generations as well. And I think that might play into this down the line.
That's a great shout.
Wow.
There's so many different things that make a great Star Wars movie. And I remember going to watch The Force Awakens again, expecting, eagerly wanting certain things. And like you said, Jimmy, as well, I think the different age groups, everyone wants a different thing because they've all got their first Star Wars memory. I think that lives a lot with people. And one of the comments that we had from Mark Rolfe is the connection to the first thing that made you fall in love with it. So I think straight away is probably the biggest thing is going to be the connection if you're a returning fan. However, if you're a new upcoming fan, maybe something to discuss later on in this this episode. But for me as a returning fan, I'm with Mark on this one. It's something that bridges that connection. What about you, Charlie?
See, this is something really specific for me. I'm a long-standing prequels fan. That's my favorite trilogy. And you'd think that my interest would be in high quality special effects because that was such a huge part of the prequels trilogy. Actually, what specifically makes Star Wars for me is adherence to the original aesthetic of Star Wars. I am aware that that particular, especially when it comes to the original trilogy, that tone of how everything looked is especially influenced by the era that it was made in, budget constraints. This was a very, very small group of practical effects artists working day and night with any bit of scrap they could find off of the floor of the workshop and shoving it together.
Yeah.
However, there's something about that that I feel is missing from especially current Star Wars. Parts of it were captured in Andor and especially in Skeleton Crew. There was much more of that leaning to the grit, the dirt, the handmade thrown together part of it. I feel like that's been missing. I feel like even that was missing in The Force Awakens. Like I know Rey is in the desert, but she is still shockingly squeaky clean for a desert rat. There are elements of modernness and sleekness and cleanness which are very in keeping with our world. But I don't want to be in our world. I want to be in that world. So for me specifically, it's adherence to not even the canon or the characters or George's ideas, just the aesthetic of it, the look, and
See,
those little details.
and I think, Charlie, it's a really good point. And it's funny to me that as a prequelist, that you would say that, because like for me, my biggest gripe about the prequels when I first saw them and for a long time after is they didn't look or feel like Star Wars to me. Yeah, we had more Jedi and we got the
Yeah.
story and that
Mhm.
felt like it, but it didn't look like Star Wars. Everything was sleek and clean where it wasn't lived in. And I know it's a different time period. That's why like when you go back and you look at the Acolyte,
Yeah.
like Star Wars should be the cheapest show to make if it just needs to be lived in and dirty and grungy, right? I thought Mando did a pretty good job when he was in, walking through the cities of
Yes.
in Navarro and stuff like that, of making it feel like um, what we saw originally. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of surprising to me that's your thing, because like it doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel like it lines up. You know what I mean? Like you
I
love
know
this
it feels
like lived in
contradictory.
thing, but the movies you grew up with are like the clean and what really drove a lot of people, I think, my age. And I'm not speaking for everybody. I just kind of what when we talk to people is like it didn't look and feel like Star Wars to us.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
for me personally, though, Star Wars has always been part of my life. I was born in '76. I mean, obviously, I wasn't really coherent when the first one came out, but as soon as I could start watching movies, Star Wars was it, right? And so the
Mhm.
imagination of it, the spectacle, just the mythology of it all, really, for me, like I think that's what makes a good Star Wars movie. That's why I love like Dave Filoni. I know people aren't always
Yeah.
happy with storytelling, but he brings in mythology from different places. You got Shin and Balin, both named after this wolf, Viking history, and just bringing in stuff. The hero's journey. And I didn't realize it at the time. Like now, as a 50-year-old man, I get, oh, this is a hero's journey. This is why I love this story and why I love all these different stories, because they're all the same.
Yeah.
You got this call to action and do all these things. So for me, I think honestly, it's that, following that pattern of the call, the hero's journey. And I know it can vary, and I'm glad that it does vary. I don't
Mm.
want the same cookie cutter stuff. But
Mhm.
for me, I think just because of such a young age, and we didn't have, Mike and I talk about it all the time growing up, is like we were out in the woods playing with lightsabers that were sticks. Well, we didn't have all sabers to go and build me a saber. Do you know what I mean? Like I couldn't go online and buy. You couldn't go online when I was a kid, folks. You had to go to the store. You had to go to Toys R Us. So I think that makes a big difference in like how things go.
Yeah.
And just the imagination. So that's what really pulls me into it, is when I think they've done something clever, something I couldn't think of. I do think that like my imagination runs wild, and it always has, and I think it's because of things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and having these adventures. So I think for me, those movies have to do that. um they need to fit a certain narrative, not a certain narrative, they need to fit together for me too, I guess.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
Yeah.
trilogy, because we'll talk about our favorite movie and our least favorite movie. And my least favorite movie, one of them, is one of the most beautiful movies shot, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Mhm.
So, but yeah. So, anyways, that's where I'm coming from
Yeah.
as the old
Nice.
guy on the show.
Love it. So just building on from that, then we're going to dive into one of our favorite movies, or the favorite Star Wars movie, any of your choice, really. And we're just going to dive into like 3 things why that makes such a great Star Wars movie in your opinion. So I'll start us off to get the ball rolling. We'll just rattle 3 things off. So for me, I'm going to choose Rogue One. Rogue
Nice.
One, what a film! One of the biggest things for films, for stories, anything, is having that connection or developing a bond for the main characters. pretty much from the word go, you're introduced to Jin, and you sort of feel for her. She's losing both parents. She's on her
Some
own
of
in a
us do,
hole.
right, Charlie?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Um, and then obviously you meet in Beige, Chewit as well. Again, two extremely vulnerable characters, especially Chewit being blind. And he's talking about the Force. Again, it's sort of getting that connection. At this point, we're still not seeing any Jedi's as such. Obviously, we meet Cassian. We've got K2, and even Bodhi. I'd argue, you do build a bit of a connection with him. The Imperial pilot that turns against them, and yeah, I think a big thing in any film is having that connection and that bond with all those characters. And obviously, me being me, I sat there watching the film, and at the end of it, when everyone had died, pretty much, I wasn't expecting everyone to die, if I'm totally honest. I thought maybe one or two would get off world, or we'd see them later in something else, but no, literally everyone dies. So yeah, the storytelling for the character bonding in that film is next to none for me. The next one, easy one to mention, Mark's already gone on about, is that connection again to previous things. We're talking about the Force, massive, the Death Star. We're seeing Moff Tarkin in it. Or mentions of. We get Leia. The biggest thing, probably arguably one of the most iconic scenes, is the Vader hallway scene. I mean, things like that just take your breath away. And again, we're seeing another angle of a iconic character, and it's just huge. So again, a lot of connections to the previous films that we've seen before, even with Admiral Radis as well. The X-wing, we're seeing shore troopers, totally brand new troopers that we'd never seen, but we're still kind of getting that nostalgia feeling, because then you've got the AT-ATs, the X-wings coming in. It's just absolutely bonkers crazy. And the last thing for me is aliens as well, different types of species. And I've got this vivid memory when I was in Woolworths when I was a kid. I was about 9 years old, and I was looking at Star Wars Phantom Menace toys, and I remember some random man talking to me about Star Wars, and he'd been to see it, and he said he didn't think it was as good as the originals because there wasn't many aliens in it. I don't know why that memory's just stuck with me. I don't know if he was watching the same film as me, but there was definitely a lot more aliens, I thought, in Phantom Menace than there was A New Hope. But hey, but yeah, seeing lots of different types of aliens and species for me it just adds another element, to the story. And it's easy for us all here to talk about, story being the biggest part of the film. And it's probably it's definitely up there as well. But sticking with like three sort of film themes. So for me, it would be the nostalgia feeling, the bond for the characters, and just different aliens, if you like. Jimmy, I'm going to come to you last because I know what your film's going to be. Charlie, we're going to go to you first.
Oh, go on then. So this won't be a surprise to any of you. One of my favorite Star Wars films is The Force Awakens. Now, irrespective of everything that comes after that in terms of storytelling, The Force Awakens for me represents the perfect little sweet spot of everything that Star Wars should have been and could have been. I guess my three big points are: Jimmy, you're a fiend because you stole my point. I was also going to talk about the hero's journey, which I think The Force Awakens does beautifully. Absolutely textbook, step by step by step by step. Everything from call to action, refusal of the call, all of it is perfectly illustrated in Rey's story. That specifically is a hugely important factor to me. That clean, clear-cut storytelling. Yes, I love morally ambiguous characters like Anakin Skywalker. Oh my goodness, all day, every day. But the original Star Wars, Luke is us. We are Luke. He is blank enough for us to insert ourselves onto, and then we can be him, and we can have our own hero's journey within Star Wars. Rey was what my generation needed for that. She was perfect. And that leads me on to my second point, which is a compelling main character. This is where Jack and I differ on Rogue One. I do not think Jyn Erso is a compelling main character when you compare her next to Rey, which might be considered controversial, but I think for me there's something about Rey that just tips that balance over. So yeah, really strong character story, really strong main characters, solid and clean storytelling, and See, I feel like I've just nicked all of Jack's points as well because I think it has to be creatures. There was so much in The Force
Yeah.
Awakens that felt familiar and comforting. So the creature nostalgia, it has to be nostalgia. They hit the nostalgia button
Yeah.
just enough that it was so I was in floods of tears the entire film in the cinema. It was just enchanting enough, but not so over the top that it got sickening.
Nostalgia is such a big one. It is
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
huge. It
Mm.
is such a big one. Go on, Jimmy.
And I
What have you got?
even think,
Well,
Sorry,
sorry.
Charlie.
well,
Go on.
no, go ahead, Charlie.
No, I was going to say, and I think even though George was young when he made the original trilogy, there's
Yeah.
something in the nostalgia of it that he's hitting on and he's exploiting and he's utilizing already, and
Yeah.
it's something that's continuous and I think is so essential. And I think things like Acolyte, love it to death, but oh my goodness, so empty of that nostalgia, and you feel it. You feel it.
Yeah. Charlie, I have a question for you. Can I get a follow-up
Mm.
question for you with this Jin
Mhm.
versus Rey scenario? Um,
Mm.
so you see Rogue One, and then you see,
Mhm.
and of course you've seen The Force Awakens first. Do you feel, did you feel that immediate connection to Rey? Like, we got 3 movies with Rey. You got
Mm.
1 movie with Jin. Do you think that has anything to do with it, or you just didn't connect with Jin in that way? Because you know what I mean? Like, I've been
Mm.
on record as saying, like, I feel like Daisy Ray was interesting to me. Like, I'm all
Mhm.
for female Jedi. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love
Mhm.
the story, good story. But I feel as the more we got of her, kind of like Ahsoka, the more I grew attached to her. Whereas, like, I got one
Yes,
movie with Jin, and I'm like, Jin's awesome. Like, strong female
that's my
character.
wife.
Like, there you go. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of curious as to like what the difference was in the very first 2 movies. Like, you saw that movie, but the connection wasn't there for you. Like, I just kind of curious as to, is it because you got more time with Ray?
That is you've put me on a puzzler. That's a really interesting question. I do think time duration was something to do with it. And I also think so the knowledge of watching Rogue One, we're leading up to the Death Star, we're leading up to the Death Star plans. The story is very backed by these big stories and big plot points. And I found myself way more interested in that than any of the actual characters. Whereas
Mm.
with The Force Awakens, it was very much here is your main character. Here she is wrapped up and presented, ready for you to go enjoy. I felt like a kid getting a Barbie. I didn't feel that way with Rogue One because I was
Okay.
so interested in
The
the
connection.
wider story rather than this individual kind of path. Like it's so important to tell, and obviously without Rogue One, we wouldn't have had Andor and etc. etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never felt that level of that's her, she's mine.
That
That's my character.
Yeah, that makes sense though. I see that because it's still a grand scale, but it starts out small and we don't know where it's headed.
Mm.
So I guess that makes sense. I never really thought of it that way because I remember the first time you said that to us, and I was like, I think Charlie might be crazy. But
Can
no,
confirm.
that makes
You're not wrong.
that makes perfect sense. I've never thought about it on the scale of things. I know people are like, whoa, that was a galactic scale, but it doesn't start out that way. It starts out with Ray just trying to find who she is and everything. So,
Mhm.
and then at the end it does. All right, I like that. For me, I mean, everyone knows, and I honestly, I've been racking my brain as to why Solo. Like, why do I identify with that movie so much? And I mean, the cop out is nostalgia, I guess. It
Yeah.
made me feel like, and it's not nostalgia of like the things that happen because there's a lot of that in there, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But it made me feel like I felt when I watched Star Wars. It was just Star Wars originally, but A New Hope as a kid, right? Like
Yeah.
that, those feelings. Just I don't know what it is about it, but it resonates more with me. Like I feel like Solo's more of a Star Wars movie than most of the things that have come out. I don't know why necessarily. Typically, I judge a movie if I walk out of the theater and I'm happy. I liked it, right?
Solid.
And I will say this, like it's weird because Force Awakens, I walked out super pumped. Rogue One, pumped. And I walked out. I would always go see it with my swimmers, my guys. Would go see it, and then I'd come back around. I'd meet up with other people and be in the IMAX. So I'd see it twice within like a couple hours. And like the Last Jedi, I walked out and I met the guy I was supposed to go see it with. And I'm like, he's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't think I like that." Right. And it was just a feeling. But we went back in,
Yeah.
we watched it again, and I still was like, and then of course I walk out of the Rise of Skywalker and people were mad about the pace and all that stuff. But I walked out with a smile on my face. So I was like, hey, good story. For me, it's the relationships, I think, too, in a story.
Yeah.
Like the relationships between the characters, and I thought that Solo had a lot of things going on. And I feel like I wish we'd have gotten more. I still wish they would do some kind of comics or books with
Yeah.
Beckett and Rio. I would love to get more attached to that group so that when that happens at the beginning of the movie, but those relationships, you could feel it, right?
Yeah.
Like you could see that. Then you have, of
Mhm.
course, you have Han and Kira, and they introduce this woman. Like everybody should hate Kira because she's not Princess Leia, right? Like everyone should hate her because that's the girl who's standing in the way of Han and Leia. But people love her, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Majority. Um, you know, I think she's intriguing. I've never was a huge fan of Amelia Clark until that movie. So yeah, nostalgia, the relationships, and then this clever writing. And I know some people don't think it's clever, but there are so many little tidbits that they just kind of brush over, like, "Oh, you're the one who pushed Aurra Singh," and then or the fact that every
Mm.
time they talk about the coaxium, it goes up in price. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
so human nature. Like it's like that's 500, 600, credits, and then it's like 1,000 credits. Then they're going to buy their own ship with it by the end of the it's just these little things like that, and just things that are snuck in there that you still catch. I remember watching it the other day, and something I cannot remember what it was, Jack. I remember texting you like, I didn't know they said this, and there was some kind of connection to something else. I'll have to go back and watch it again. But those connections that they make, like the Easter eggs and things like that, I think that's a big part of it. But there are no Easter eggs in the first Star Wars for me. Do you know what I
No.
mean? So it's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just that story. Maul showing up, that surprise bad guy, that surprise. Where's the story going to go next? Those
Mm.
kinds of things really. But they wrapped up that story. I think that you had to have a single story in a movie, but then have that potential to like. I know
Mhm.
they were talking
Expand.
about more movies, but yeah. So for me, that's what I feel like. That's the stuff I need, and of course, then it's wrapped up in Star Wars. You got the Millennium Falcon, you got Lando, you've got droids, you got all these things, and Chewie, and so like that's just like the icing on the cake for me with as far as Star Wars movies go, and with Solo especially. So, but I just love the
Okay.
relationships in that.
Nice. Okay, so some of the common themes that have stuck out during this conversation, as I've been taking notes, just because I'm a nerd, is nostalgia. Is probably the arguably the biggest one we've all mentioned a
Mhm.
lot. Um, Characters, again, I've spoke about it. Charlie's got a reason, same detail as you, Jimmy. But again, with the characters, sort of comes down to relationships. An honourable mention for myself that didn't get mentioned, which I'm quite surprised at, but it's definitely up there for me, and it's something I always look for now, especially in some of the TV series. I'm not we're talking about movies, but is the score. I think music is a massive thing
Yes.
for Star Wars, and would easily make my top 5 things. I know we only spoke about 3, but music has to have a great score. Has to.
Yes.
What are your
I think.
thoughts on that, Charlie? Sorry, go on, Jimmy.
Oh, sorry. Mine's quick. I don't think that music was that important to me as a kid, but now
Mm,
I love it. I mean, my number one uh, person on Spotify was Kevin Kiner, right? So I've gone
yeah,
from not really enjoying music when I was younger, not really understanding it, to like, you know, going down and seeing the symphony play, all that stuff. But yeah, I think music's huge because when we were talking about Skeleton Crew, I felt like it was missing. And that's the first time I've really watched a show
yeah.
that and like listening for the music, that's just
Mhm.
something new for me as far as like soundtracks and things. Like it's some kind of this is kind of
Yeah.
like a new, you know, entryway into Star Wars. A new thing that pulls me in is like, does the music hit?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. That's probably why it wasn't in my top three though, because this is really the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
2 years or so I've really
Yeah.
gotten into scores and things like that. Charlie, what about you?
I've been a huge fan of the Star Wars scores since I watched The Phantom Menace as a child. It's music in films is something that's always
Yeah.
been very, very, very essential to me. It has to have that pull-in factor, and I think there's something about John Williams particularly. Obviously, he's an incredibly prolific composer with a huge repertoire of films under his belt, but I think Star Wars is where he particularly shines. I remember I saw a video on social media once of a guy going around and asking people, "What's your favorite piece of music from like Marvel?" And nobody could really think of anything specific. Whereas if you ask that question of what's your favorite piece of music from Star Wars, you'll get everything from the main theme, Duel of the Fates, Across the Stars, to The Mandalorian. It's something Star Wars does very, very well is specific melodies, specific themes that go with specific characters. So that connection is constantly running through. Like you hear Rey's theme multiple times in multiple different ways, played by multiple different instruments across the entirety of the sequel trilogy. You have it with Luke's theme and Leia's theme and Han's theme in the original trilogy. I'm so glad they got John Williams to score the sequels because
Yeah.
that is essential. And I think Skeleton Crew was lacking some of that. Really good walking themes. Really enjoyed the themes
I
that were playing when they were walking around
Yeah.
everywhere. Loved that. Very J.J. Abrams, if you guys have watched Lost, very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean, Jimmy. It makes me so happy that you're into scores and into that kind of music now. That's
it's like changed my outlook on stuff. It's so weird. Like, I sit there and I listen. I mean, my number one song 2 years ago, I think, was Ahsoka's end credits, but it had that like, not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, like the cello, and I really kind of like that kind of pulled me in. But yeah, it's very new. I'm not, I mean, I feel completely out of my element. Like when Jack and I spoke with Brad,
Yeah.
he had a lot of things, and I was really like maybe the most nervous I've ever been. Was like, I don't know anything about music, man. Like I don't know how this is
bring
going to
him
go.
back, please.
Yeah, he's really cool. So, and then of course with Mark just took it to another level. He's playing music for us, and he's
It's
talking about the themes, and
unreal.
we'll definitely get him back on and talk some music again. But yeah, so it's pretty new to me. I love it. I'm glad it's really kind of expanded. Um, I have one for you guys. What about action scenes? Are action
Nice.
scenes important? Can a movie be great? Could a Star Wars movie be great if it was just like drama? Because we don't. I mean, we get that's some of the stuff with Andor, where it's like I know it's not a movie. We're talking movies
Yeah.
and stuff, but because there are those 3 episode arcs, and we're getting more of that in season 2. People complain that not much happened, but man, like stuff. I mean, the storyline and the character development, I just thought was outstanding. But of course, you get those beautiful action scenes when they're flying out of Aldhani and things like
That's
that.
it.
One Way Out. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, think about and realistically, how boring is watching them work in Arcana 5, but it all pays off with One Way Out. So, like, what do you guys feel about the action of movies? Is that important? Because I mean, I feel like it. I mean, maybe I just left it off because like I'm a big dumb boy, but I feel like action plays a good part into the movies.
Yeah, I'd agree with that massively. I mean, again, iconic scenes in pretty much all the Star Wars films. People definitely revert back to lightsaber battles, or even like you've mentioned, doesn't have to be lightsaber battles. I'd probably argue Rogue One's hallway scene wasn't really a lightsaber battle per se; it was just a slaughter.
Iconic though.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely an action scene. They do play a big part because I think the thing with Andor as well, it's a lot of suspense, a hell of a lot of suspense. But I think action scenes make films great as well. Getting it right has to be up there on the list. What about you, Charlie?
I think it's important. I do sometimes wonder that some films kind of go too far one way and too heavy on the action. Like if you look at the original trilogy, there is action, but it's very nicely spliced between scenes of doing, moving, talking, going places, finding out things about the plot and the wider world. And this is one of the criticisms I will level against the prequel trilogy. They are especially Revenge of the Sith. Very, very, very action heavy. In fact, I
Yeah.
don't really think we get a moment with any character where the threat of violence isn't literally round the corner. It gets very intense. It's very, very heavy going, and I appreciate that, especially like The Force Awakens kind of took a little bit of a step back, a bit more character focused.
Yeah.
I love action. I think it's important, but make sure that if you strip that action away, you've still got a good story and good characters left behind. If you strip the action away and it falls to pieces, maybe we've gone a little bit too far.
Yeah, great points. Yeah. Okay. So I think that nearly wraps up some of the key areas that we're looking for, what we look for as viewers for the movies. And like I said earlier as well, we've still got a whole host of comments. And like Jimmy always emphasised, as well as me and Charlie, this show is for the listeners as well. And we're always keen to get as many comments read out as possible. So we're going to dive into the part 2 of the show, which is more responses. And again, we'll just keep it in the same order we've been doing it. And starts off is a person with a fantastic name. It's Jack at Dylan Does Cosplay. A return to the tone of Rogue One, more brutality and violence. Like you said earlier, this is about that grit in Star Wars, that realism. Disney have shown they can do this for several other franchises, including Marvel. Looking at the Daredevil trailer, so I think it's time for Star Wars to do the same. Completely agree. Next one, what we got there, Jimmy?
All Dot Sabers, good friends of the show, said good character building and a duel. Of course, they want a duel. That's good for business. But yeah, good character building, and then good character building. Nothing builds character like almost getting your head chopped off by a lightsaber. So, but I mean,
There
I
we
do think
go.
that's what sets Star Wars apart from anything else. We talked about it. Was that last week? No, 2 weeks ago. Man, it all kind of blurs together, doesn't it? All the good conversations that we have, but yeah, I mean, I think that's what sets Star Wars apart. I know, Charlie, you had a pretty good comment on that one.
I did. I just wrote underneath this that, like, I understand the importance of good character building, but I also understand why fans say that characters like Rey were rushed. It'd be really nice to see some focus on pivotal moments with a character that moves their personal growth along instead of just being entirely plot or location focused. A lot of Rey's story was a smash button advanced plot.
Yeah.
That's why I want
And I'd
these
like to
new
see
movies of hers. Like, let's flesh her out a little bit more, for sure. I
stop
mean, I
leaving
think
it to the comics and
yeah,
the extra stuff and the books and the novelizations to do that. Give me that in the films because Daisy
yeah.
can do it. She's got the chops. That's not.
I mean, you say that, and I'm thinking for me, Clone Wars, right? As someone who not a huge fan of the prequels at first, I've come around not being a hater. I mean, I still got issues with some of it, but the Clone Wars, the more time we got with all those characters and with Anakin, and it just set everything up. Could they do that? Do you think with Rey? Could they do I don't know what the heck they would call it, but is there a possibility of an animated show that could drop similar to like Bad Batch and things like that could build that up? Is there enough there, do you think? Because
Take
the
my money.
problem with it
Disney, take my money.
is like there's not as much space between the movies. Like they kind of happen really
No.
quickly. I just kind of wonder if that would help. I mean, it's a great point. Character building, like you have to have it. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's still one character we haven't seen built animation wise as well. And I'd say it's Ventress. And I mean built from the Clone Wars series to Bad Batch. She is a whole different person. So there's definitely something there they could do with her and Voss, 100%.
I really wish Dark Disciple would have gotten put into the run. I mean, I
Yes.
know we got more out of it because it was a book, but I think that would have brought a lot of people over to Ventress, because I know Jack, you recently listened to that. I think we both did. Like we kind of reread it and stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. Like that's the thing is just the more time you spend. Plus, we also got her in Dooku Jedi Lost. I mean, half that book's
Great
about her.
book.
We did.
So, and then you're
Great
getting
book.
more insight. You're getting more story. You're getting more. I mean, the stuff that happened to Asajj, like, well, no wonder she's messed up. Like all the crazy things that have happened to her. So, yeah, that's a good shout. Asajj is a good one with character building and stuff. So.
Brilliant one. Next one we've got is Dark Prince Cosplay. Maintaining the core vision of its creator. There is no Star Wars without George Lucas. Charlie, what did you have to say about that one?
So I thought this was a really interesting point. I was kind of hoping somebody would bring this up. This is something I really, really love discussing with, especially absolutely no offense to slightly older Star Wars fans who were there for the kind of original
Whoa, shots
trilogies.
fired.
Whoa. Sorry, whoa. Sorry,
I'm
guys.
right
Sorry.
here. We have feelings,
All right, old men. See, I absolutely agree with the ideas of maintaining the kind of core vision, but how can that be fully realized when the original creator is no longer actively participating?
Yeah.
It reminds me of how when Tolkien passed away, he left books and books and books and books of unfinished manuscripts, half a language that he never finished writing, and so much that was left over for his sons and the Tolkien estate to piece together. And what remains of that kind of forward moving legacy maybe isn't quite what Tolkien could have hoped for. And I worry that if Star Wars keeps trying to cling to what came before, it's going to be a detriment in the end. And maybe it just needs to try something completely new.
Fair.
I when people argue the whole George thing,
Mm.
he contradicted himself, and he does it all the time to interviews. It
Yes.
depends on what year
Yes.
he's giving the interview, and I don't, and
Yeah.
I love George Lucas, and I am so thankful for George Lucas. Like without him, there is no Star Wars. You're exactly right. Without the maker, thank the maker
Mhm.
that he
Thank the
created this,
maker.
his love, his nerdum. I mean, everything he loved and he brought into Star Wars is what we love about it. But it does have to grow. Like,
Yeah.
even like Marvel has branched out and how they do their shows are different,
Yes.
but it's true to stuff. I don't think that, have you ever heard what George's sequel trilogy was going to be? Like it was a weird like midichlorian thing. I mean, I don't think it would have
Yeah.
gone well. And people can sit there and
No.
say blah blah blah, but these are the same people that was like the People versus George Lucas documentaries and things like that, where they were all up in arms about him.
We had
Um,
an episode about
he made it, and it's is everything going to be perfect and everything going to be exactly what he wanted? No, but I don't even think he knew exactly what he wanted. I mean, he wouldn't have had
that.
Leia and Luke kiss if he'd have known what he was going to do. I mean, that right there, and I'm not mad about it. Like the story progresses, and then they slip things back in, and I think they do a good job. And the best thing I can say is like in Kenobi, not my favorite series, but the whole Darth thing. They explain that, and they go back. They're able to explain that through that story, and I think that people hang on to George too much. I think like be appreciative. Thank God he
Mhm.
made Star Wars. Thank goodness that it worked out the way it did. But like you said, Charlie, it has to keep developing. It has to keep
Yeah.
moving on. Like if all these guys my age want to hold on to it, never want it to change, then what's going to happen when we're all dead? Like Star Wars is no longer going to be anything. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And again, I'm not bashing George. I love George. I'm
Yeah,
so
same.
thankful for him. But things have to progress. And I mean,
Mhm.
we're going to talk about some stuff next week probably that you know needed to change in Star Wars. You take a look at Star Wars and you take a look at
Yes.
Rogue One. There's a very big difference in the cast and crew. So all I'll
Yep.
say is a little hint
Mhm.
towards next week's episode.
Nice. What other comments have we got, Jimmy?
Where are we? Okay. Oh my gosh, is Callahancy? I'm messing that up. Callahan.
Callahan K. Lacey. My bad.
Okay, no, so fun. As long as it is fun and exciting, I'm in. I haven't been disappointed in any film. Yes.
Great
Have
comment.
fun.
That's
That's
what we
what it's
like to
all about.
hear.
Yes, I'm glad. I love it that people love everything. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think a new thing as well that we're sort of bringing in is the comment of the week, and I think that is probably tied, in my opinion, with Mark Rolfe's comment because we keep going back to the
Mhm.
nostalgia thing. So between the two of you, I think you've got the very first trophy for this week's comment of the week. Yeah, nice new segment of literally just plucked out of thin air. The force is definitely with me today. Next comment we've got is Ren Respawn. Lauren, callbacks or Easter eggs within the score.
Yeah.
Nice. What do you have to say about that one, Charlie?
Absolutely, yes, 100%. I'm an absolute sucker for it. I have been known to bawl my eyes out any second I hear anything close to the Twin Suns theme. That specific, like 5 notes,
Yes.
I'm off. I'm gone. Floods. Also, Jack, how dare you? You missed out my best boy, my best Grey Jedi hater. Dylan does cosplay. He just said lightsabers. He's a good man. He knows what he wants and he's sticking with it. And I respect that. I really do.
Nice. Nice. And I think we've got one more, Jimmy.
Yes, Crimson_cosplay. Matt, can I say Raylo? I think I should say Raylo. That's fine. I'm not a huge Raylo person. but everyone is allowed to like what they
Yep.
want. What do you think about that,
This
Charlie?
is
How
very
you were?
true.
Are you into Raylo?
No, no. Listen, Matt, I love you. We listen, we don't judge. But
Ah,
please,
yeah.
George Nolfi, if you're listening by some small miracle, please listen to me right now. I don't want any forced ghost romances. I don't want Ben Solo appearing to Rey as a force ghost and they fall in love with each other. I don't want any unexpected pregnancies like Anakin. No, no immaculate conception. None of that. Very specifically, no. It was a lovely moment. I understand why they wrote it that way, but no
Yeah.
more, please, because the Raylo fandom in itself, unhinged. Get in the bin.
And it's a lot with the Raylo stuff. I mean, because people talk about the toxic.
Much.
I get the idea of wanting the love, the love scene, and we don't really get a lot of that. I mean, in Star Wars, really. I mean, well, take that back. You had Han and Leia in the first, in the first trilogy. Then you got Padme and you got Anakin. But I don't know. It's
Yeah.
weird. I do want to ask you guys something, and
No.
it's Ren Respawn thing about the callbacks or Easter eggs within the score. Do you remember back when we were watching Acolyte and they dropped, was it Kylo's theme? Was it right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It was Rise of the Resistance. It was Kylo's theme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
So
did
like,
that come
I mean, I liked most of what they did in that show. I mean, was it? Like we said a million times, it's not perfect and it could have
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
better. But like, why did they do that? I mean, that is a big thing for Star Wars fans. We love the motifs. We love hearing. I mean, I think Kevin Conner is like amazing at like
from? Word.
taking these songs and like doing them a little bit different, change them a little bit. Because he
Hmm.
has to make so much of it, and not all of it's going to be original. But he takes that stuff and he changes it and he melds it into his own thing. Um, was that a mistake on their part to drop something like that and then not? I mean, this is supposed to pay off years later. I mean, that's what I just wonder, because that is
Yeah.
a big thing with Star Wars fans is the music, and we don't miss anything. I mean, people literally do make a living breaking down everything in Star Wars. And so I was just kind of
Hmm.
wonder what you guys think about that, because I think that's a really good comment. And like you said, Charlie, you get weepy whenever you hear certain songs, and I mean, I get goosebumps when
I
you hear
do.
like the Force theme or whatever. I'm like, oh, here
Yeah.
it comes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Binary Suns. I mean, just you know. So, what do you guys think about that?
It's
Who
a
knows?
very powerful tool that should not, a very powerful tool musically that should not be
Yeah.
abused, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think the Acolyte is very sneaky for putting that in very brazenly as well. It wasn't subtly slid into the background. If you're a
No. Yeah.
sequels fan, you can identify that piece of music within like the first two notes. It it should be used to invoke emotion, to move the audience, to move the viewer, not just for the Easter egg hunters. I think that frustrates me a little. I love Easter eggs and I love callbacks, not when they're just in there for the YouTube video, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Great shouts. Awesome. So that then pretty much wraps up this week's topic.
All right. I'm gonna give a massive shout out to all of our followers and listeners, and we can't do the show without you. I mean, we just spoke another 20 minutes based on all your guys' ideas, and they were amazing. So we really thank you guys. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the messages. Keep commenting. Join the Facebook stuff. We want to engage with you guys. That's the whole point of it. Like people always ask, like, what's the best thing about doing a show like this? And it's like meeting everybody. I would have
Yeah.
no idea. Jack is. I wouldn't know Charlie. We wouldn't know Taylor. I mean, I would know Mike because we grew up together. But we're talking with people all over the world and all over the Star Wars world, and I absolutely love it. We want more of it. So keep commenting,
Mhm.
get active, and thank you guys for all your love and support so far.
You can, if you've got anything you want to add to the show or listed, you can DM us on our socials, send us an email or a voice note at exploretheforce@gmail.com. And remember to like this episode, share it with your Star Wars friends and family, and follow us on all our social media platforms. All you have to do is search Explore the Force, all one word. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Yes. And for all the movies that you love, you don't love, all the TV shows that you like, animated shows that you like, love them, hate them, do whatever you want, do it peacefully, be kind. We'll see you guys next week. We have spoken.
See you next week.
step.
Close your eyes. Feel it.
Wise as Master Yoda, as powerful as Master Windu.
They'll do their job well. I'll guarantee that.
I am going to end this once and for all.
Chewie. We're home.
You were the chosen one!